We've been reviewing this whole week the different steps we need to take when we're working with the text set. Remember, the first thing that you do is to read the prompt. Whether the prompt is the first page or the prompt is after the text set, you want to read that first. All right, I'm going to wait for a second because I don't have everybody's attention. I know I have your attention if you're looking at me. And you write your thesis right on the page that has the writing prompt. If it's an informational essay they're asking you to write, you write one thesis. If it's an informational essay that they're asking you to write, you write two, one for each side of the argument. So remember, think back to zoos. We had zoos. Remember they asked your opinion? They said to write an essay as to whether that you felt zoos were harmful or zoos were helpful. Remember that way back when we started the school year? So the two theses that you would write on the writing prompt page would be zoos are helpful and zoos are harmful. Because when you are writing an opinion essay, you want to make sure you have a thesis for both sides. Now the reason we write it on our prompt page is because we do not want to make the mistake of writing a thesis later that does not align with the prompt. And so remember the practice that we did earlier this week? We looked at the prompt, we decided on the keywords that we needed to include in our thesis, and we wrote a thesis. We practiced, we did 7 of them. And I wrote notes and gave you feedback on your work, and hopefully you will learn from that what you need to do in order to be successful. Now, we have been doing this next step, reading and annotating the text, wearing a lens of your task, okay? So, as we've been reading this text set about the American Revolution, Roman, I'll wait until you're looking at me, that way I know you're paying attention. Whatever you have in your hand, I'm going to ask you to put it down. Thank you. We have been reading and annotating, and yesterday I reviewed with you what that looks like. Remember, we read a section, and then we stop and we say, what am I learning here? What is the author's main idea? And we just jot the main idea in the white space. It might just be a couple of words. Doesn't have to be a sentence. You do not have to annotate after each paragraph. If the article or the source is already broken into sections with headings, you read the whole section. If it's not, then you have to use your good reading senses to note when the author is shifting from one main idea to the other. What happens when you get to the end of your annotation is that you have a lot of main ideas written in the white space. Now you can go back and use those breadcrumbs to not only know where they talk about them, but to know how across all of the texts they may talk about the same main idea. When you're able to pull out main ideas that is similar across several texts, it's called cross-text synthesis. And that's one of the standards that we've been working on, not only in this unit, but in the very first unit we did at the beginning of the year. And you need to be able to do that. That's a standard you need to master. Today, what I want to do is I want to introduce you to a different way of planning. And this different way is a little bit of a modification of what we already use. But because our prompt that we're working with has to do with problem and solution, we're going to set it up a little bit differently. So let's just go ahead and reread our prompt. The American colonists faced many challenges in the war against Great Britain. Write an informational essay in which you explain what the problems were and how they were solved. So we've already discussed how this prompt is asking you to write in a problem, solution format, text structure. We know that if we use our chart on text structures, it's going to give us some of those clue words that help us identify the text structure of something we're reading. And we're going to use those same clue words in order to write in that text structure. But today what we're going to do is we're going to start planning. Some of you are either finished reading and annotating the text, or you're nearly finished. And now is the time to start collecting main ideas. Now, before we move on, I'm just going to ask everybody to look at me again. Drexy, put your hand down. You're falling asleep. Main ideas do not contain details. And let me tell you an example. When you were writing about the wild among us, remember that text set that was our mock FSA? Go ahead, Octavian. When you were writing about that mock FSA, is that Miss Ellie? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was Miss Cohn. I apologize, Octavian. My fault. When you were writing about the wild among us, if you said squirrels chew things, or squirrels chew the wires, or squirrels cause power outages, you were stating a detail. A main idea of that would have been something like, squirrels disrupt people's lives. Because definitely having the power go out because the squirrels have chewed through disrupts your life. And some of the details you would have, that's when you would talk about or explain, because that was an informational, explain why squirrels chew things and what happens when they chew the wires and how that affects people. Okay? So there is a difference between main ideas and details, and you need to stop and ask yourself, is this a main idea or is this a detail? Now, all of that, main idea, detail, we've done that. We've done 2 units where we've done that. Not only that, but you also learned that last year, and you learned that the year before. So main idea, detail should really be a review for you. All right, so let's get to our planning sheet. Who has a good thesis statement that they would like to share? Galila? Okay, the American colonists. And guys, you don't have to have this. This is just one example of several that were acceptable. The American colonists faced, what did you say?
Many challenges
in the war against Great Britain. And you can clearly see that this thesis statement, the language in this thesis statement, may I help you? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. The words, this thesis statement comes directly from the prompt so that we know it is aligned. And like I said, you could have written a different sentence that said the same thing. Okay? Some of you need to be careful because when you were writing your thesis, you were confusing the colonists and Great Britain. And you said Great Britain faced many challenges. Okay? So you need to be very careful. Again, as I said earlier, that you need to pay attention to detail. You need to pay attention to details. You wouldn't want to go to a surgeon and have him leave some of his equipment inside of you. He has to pay attention to details. She has to count her instruments when they come out. They pay attention to detail so that bad things don't happen. Now, nothing bad is going to happen except for your score. But that same doctors and anyone else who has to pay attention to detail, they didn't start doing it when they became doctors. They started doing it when they were children. That's not something that you can do and get up one day and say, I'm going to be a good speller. You have to work at it for a long period of time. Okay, so just like we've done in the past, once we have our thesis, we put it in a cloud. So look on your paper and make sure that's exactly what you did. And you have it in a cloud. That's going to stay the same. We know we need 3 problems, correct? We need to identify 3 problems that they had to solve. And we know that it has to be a problem that has a solution. It has to be a problem that has a solution. So we're still going to have our lines. And guys, some of you are making your lines like super long, all the way down to the bottom. They don't have to be that long. And your main idea is going to be the problem or the challenge. Doesn't matter, this is both. So your main idea sentence is going to be a sentence that states the problem or the challenge that they faced. And remember, we don't want it to be a detail. Once you have identified a problem through your reading, because that's where you're going to get your information from the text that I gave you. Once you have identified one of the problems, you're going to write a sentence. Remember, we keep them complete sentences, capital letter, period at the end. And you're going to have to give, then you'll have to give details of your problem. You're going to have to explain the problem. But once you do that, once you have your details, then you're going to come down here. Let me just scoot out a little bit so you can see it. Pull this down. And can you see where I drew an arrow? If you can't see, stand up so that you can see it. I've drawn 3 arrows, one directly under each of my word problems, and then under that, that's going to be the solution. And that's where you're going to explain how this problem was solved. What did the American colonists do to fix this problem? Because obviously they had to overcome these problems or challenges in order to win. And a good test for you, if you put a main idea sentence of a problem up here, but you can't find the solution, you can't use it. All right, so that's going to be your signal. That's going to be the way that you're going to prove it. When we read about Valley Forge yesterday, there was no solution to the terrible winter at Valley Forge. They just basically survived it, and that's not a solution. So if you're tempted, number one, Valley Forge would be a detail. So if you were tempted to put it up here, the first problem would be it would be a detail. The second would be that there was no solution to it. So today what I'd like you to do, go ahead back to the beginning of your text set and look through your main ideas and see if you can write any problems down. Then you can continue to read. And remember what I said, in order to be successful in planning this, you have to demonstrate your ability to synthesize information across texts. So you're not going to get all your information from one source or one article. You're going to get your information from multiple articles. Now, while you're working, I'm going to have some of you get onto the computer. So keep working unless I ask you to go get a computer. Any questions before we start? Go ahead to the bathroom room and